if you generally enjoyed or feel like your schooling was valuable, then at what point did the idea of a gap year become important enough to you to then promote it to other people? Like, when did it go from something that you personally enjoyed to something that you felt like I can and should help other people with this?
Sure. I think that it's really important that as a society, we embrace multiple pathways, because it's not about the degree and it's not about the school and it's not about how competitive it is to get into that school. It's about how can we create the most productive and happy adults that are functional in our society and can contribute back to it. And the answer to that is not to just kind of shoot them through a school, any kind of schooling experience, but it's about giving those people purpose. So I think that the bigger and better question is how can we create these humans that are going to be fully functional in our society? So when I think about that in relation to why I think the gap year is the right path, I think that it's almost like if everything could funnel from a gap year outwards or fan out from a gap year. If we encouraged all of our young people to spend this time and take ownership over their this period of emerging adulthood, and then they say with confidence, oh, like I want to work with my hands. I want to go and train to be an auto mechanic, or I love this I want to be more intellectually stimulated. I want to go to this liberal arts school, or I want to go, become a biochemist. So I'm going to go to this big research school and things like that. So I think that we just need to, think more strategically about how we give people, young adults, the advice about this, because it's such a huge financial commitment. So does that answer part of the question?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that you're not seeing or believing in the value of the school. It's that you're seeing that school can be more valuable if people do it for maybe the right reasons.
It's all about getting a better return on your investment. And I think that, when you buy a house, you tour that house, you look at the data behind what that neighborhood is like, and you think about, you think so strategically about that investment. We're asking young people to buy a house when they go to college, but we're not even really sure if they're ready to buy that house. So I think that we've really backed ourselves into a corner as far as how we counsel people on their choices.
Yeah.
And so, it's a yes and kind of situation in my mind.
And I like the analogy, and I almost think like it's with the amount of research that a lot of students, especially a lot of my students, and think about my AP kids, the amount of research and the intense kind of work that goes into choosing the college, it's almost like they know about the house. The problem is they don't have any idea what kind of house they want. Like they're looking at what is a good house in general without any understanding of what they individually need. And I think that's a big concern. I have some friends and former students who have transferred schools. I thought about transferring briefly, for a little bit. I think most people think about it at some point, but I think a lot of times when people transfer, it's because they get to a school and they realize not that it's necessarily a bad school, but that they individually want something different. And they didn't know it until it was maybe a little too late. They're already there. And so maybe it would be a nice way to get some of that ahead of time.
Epiphany for me, the real epiphany was that after my experience in Tanzania on my gap year, I thought about what I would be like as a college student if I had done that first. And it would have changed everything about my college experience. And that's, I think, why I feel so strongly about it now. And not that I would have necessarily gone to a different school, though that's maybe possible, but I don't think I would have majored in English. I would have probably majored in some sort of international development or world studies. And I would have taken everything a lot more seriously, because once you watch young people walk 2 miles to get to high school, you don't take your education for granted. And I think I did a little bit when I was at Hamilton, and that's one of my regrets. So I think that's why I want to see young people really embracing the education that they either through that they're given by the grace of their privilege, or that they're taking on a lot of debt to get to and achieve, and they're working really hard to be there.
Yeah. And, and I think that's great for me. I mean, I was a good student, and I was like a very good student. And then in high school, I was like, I was pretty good. I'm smart. I don't really need to study. So I didn't, and I did okay. And then when I got to college, I realized that like, this is expensive. Like, I'm paying for this. I'm going to take on a lot of debt to do this. And so all of a sudden, like, grades shot back up. Like, I was in every class. I have all kinds of funny stories that I don't tell on the record about, I used to tell my roommate, like, you never miss class. I remember literally dragging him out of bed. There is no excuse to not attend. We're paying so much for this. But I didn't have that same feeling about high school just because I was just there. I wasn't paying for it. I didn't have any skin in the game, so to speak. And so I went through the motions. And I think I got a good education, but I also probably could have done that a lot better. For you, if you could design your own educational experience, in your mind, what would be like the ideal school? You have a budget, you have a staff, you can have a building or no building, or I mean, be creative with it. If you could create an educational institution that you believe in, that maybe you would want to send your own children to, what to you would be the best kind of school? What would school look like?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love thinking about this. I think that I would make a self-directed mandatory gap year, because my bailiwick is, higher education. That's kind of what I think about would be when I could design a system. So I think there would be a self-directed gap year component before entry as a mandatory, policy. And then I think that the first year of college, or the first year of a 4-year experience, would be interdisciplinary, multi-country learning experience. So more of a formal gap year, if you will. And then the second year would be experiential service. So that would be like maybe a mandatory national or international service for a whole year. And then the last 2 years would be applicable training for your choice of career or major. So I think that maybe actually only 1 year of on-campus formal learning, and then maybe an externship year where you're actually on the job or something like that. So we would have a year of experiential education, a year of service, a year of formal classroom learning and that kind of intellectual stimulation and debate and paper writing and things like that. And then a year of on-the-job learning and externship and internship stuff. So it would be kind of, by the time you left, you would have experienced the world, you would have a resume built, and you would still have had that kind of on-campus experience in some ways, but it would be shortened. I don't necessarily think you need 4 years of it.
I agree. I don't know if you need 4 years of it. I mean, I did like college, but I'm very happy to spend a lot of time inside my own head, so I can sit through a lecture and entertain myself for the next 2 hours thinking about what I was just hearing. But I also know that not all of the lectures were deserving of that treatment. I also know that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I do like how you're sort of blending the experience with the travel, with the service. There's a lot to be, there's a lot of good to be done there, because you're probably taking a lot of steps towards building a more complete human being. So whatever you might be sacrificing in terms of the breadth of the curriculum, you're probably creating a lot more depth in the character of the person who would go through all of those different experiences. That'd probably be a great thing.